Good morning. The following is another chapter from the Palsy Philosopher, Secrets Revealed, Chapter 6, The Accident. The accident took place by a family member in 1964. I'm not going to mention their name because it was almost 50 years ago, and after you hear the story, you would understand that they probably don't even remember what happened, and people would be asking them about something they have no memory over. One in my family had an accident. My mom said she would make milkshakes. We were living still in Overlook Farms in 1964, and they ran up the 2 steps from the family room to the kitchen. Back then they used to have metal milkshake mixers that you put the ice cream and milk in, and they ran up the 2 steps and they hit their nose right here real hard when they fell and tripped over the step. And they had like stitches, and they thought maybe they might have had a mild concussion. So they came back from the doctors and they kept an eye on this person, but they couldn't stop crying and they were having bad headaches, so they took them to the hospital for observation. Well, after a few days, they were no longer able to walk or talk. The doctors were looking for answers and they couldn't find any. Soon all they could do was moan and move their eyes. And it was hard to tell if this person really understood anything when they were taught to. Eventually, the doctors moved my relative to Madison, Wisconsin, 90 miles away, where they thought maybe they could get better help. At this time, our mother was at Madison, Wisconsin all the time, and my dad had to stay home and work, and he would go there on weekends. There was this lady, Nell, who came to live with us to help us. She used to help us when all 10 of us kids lived in Rossmore, California. She was a single woman in her 50s, a Baptist, and I remember she would whistle all the time when she worked, and probably a lot of it was songs from her church. One day I was at my neighbor's house and I came home, and I can't remember exactly what it was about, but she said, "Johnny, be on your honor, 'cause God is always watching you." Well, that pissed me off, and I thought it was an insult to my intelligence and my faith. My mother, like I have said before, traveled clear around the world to pray for me when I was 2, because I wasn't supposed to be able to walk and talk. And then she came back and died of bone cancer. And then my dad remarried, and I love my stepmother more than any other woman I could. I couldn't have imagined loving anyone anymore. So at times I felt guilty or think about that with God. Anyway, I got mad when the lady said this, and I went, "Johnny, be good. God is always watching you." And she got mad and she told my dad. Well, my dad, I was 12 years old, and he taught us all to respect our elders, and I had to say that I was sorry, but I really wasn't. And ever since I was 8 years old, I always thought that God and relationship with God was a personal thing. The neighbors in Overlook Farms at this time were great, and people brought us dinners quite often. At this point, though, the doctors in Madison thought our family member might have had leukemia. They had to have tubes through their nose to feed them because they were unable to um, feed themselves. So at this time, we all got together in our car, and we all drove to Madison, Wisconsin, to say goodbye because they were going to give them this person their last rites. We came home after the trip, and then a few days later, all of a sudden, this person sat up in bed and was moving around after they were given a drug, and it lasted a few minutes, and they couldn't speak and whatnot, but they knew that then, well, it wasn't leukemia, that it was brain trauma to the brain, so it gave them hope. Eventually, this person was brought home, and they had to be cared for and were in a wheelchair. They couldn't speak, but they kept on having these spells, and after a while, they learned how to crawl again, and then they would crawl, and then they would stand up for a second and go back down on their feet, and then after a while, slowly speech came back, and they were given physical therapy and going to speech therapy, and eventually they recovered. And this was amazing because I went to school with other children that had accidents and ended up in wheelchairs, and they never fully recovered. At this time, though, I was still saying my prayers regularly at night, and I was thankful that my relative recovered, but I was also wondering why things were allowed to happen like this to good children. Anyway, I was so thankful of the recovery, and some in the family would say this was a miracle that would happen, and then there's others in my family that would say that this was science. Whatever, neither of us argue about it. We were just glad when our family member recovered. And we never really talk about it because when this happened to this person, it was 50 years ago, and they went on, they recovered, they were moved back into a regular grade, they got A's and B's in college without hardly even trying. They went on and had a successful career. So I thought I'd share you this part of the story of my video book because so many times nowadays we hear so much sadness and everyone seems in so much despair, and people talk about the days when America was great. Well, we have to remember that not to believe everything we see on radio or TV, or let the machine get us all emotionally worked up and angry at one another. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed Chapter 6. Chapter 7 will be coming soon. Have a great day. Peace and love.